In 2003, three school friends started a pub chain. They are now one of the most recognisable pub chains in South London. With some of the biggest sites in the UK, they have had performances from Michael McIntyre, Joe Lycett,
This is one I did.
Jack Whitehall,
He put National Treasure.
James Acaster,
Everyone's finding it difficult.
Stephen Merchant,
He's come a long way. Good lad.
Catherine Ryan,
Most people I know work every day.
and even Ed Sheeran. The pubs are the Rosendale, the Bolingbroke, the Abbeville, the Stonehouse, the Avalon, the Tommyfield, the Latchmere, and the Princess Victoria, and where we filmed this episode, the historic Bedford. They serve over 8 million people a year, and we are proud to serve up an hour of insightful stories for their 20-year anniversary of Three Cheers.
Yeah, I mean, we've had couples get married. You know, there's obviously, generally, it's a really positive story.
Hip hip hooray! Guys, welcome to Jimmy's Jobs of the Future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It feels very odd sitting on this stage, really, having watched so much comedy here at the Bedford, but it's amazing to be here. Why did you rebrand from Renaissance pubs to Three Cheers?
I suppose that all sort of came about in sort of 2011, 2012, where we were unfortunately approached by Renaissance Hotels, which was owned by the Marriott group.
Oh, yeah.
And we'd basically put 6 hotel rooms above one of our pubs, the Tommyfield in Kennington, and we got rather a stinky letter from somebody saying that Renaissance pubs was trying to pass off as Renaissance hotels, and unfortunately, as the small guy, we had a quick chat with our lawyers, and we were told to sort of stand down. And so we used this sort of moment to try and rebrand and come up with something that was, you know, new and innovative, and something that would sort of take us forward for the next, 10 or 15 or 20 years.
And so how did you then go about coming up with Three Cheers? Like, because you've been going for a little while then, right? Because it's your 20th anniversary this year.
Yeah, we'd been going for
10 years.
over 10 years, yeah. So it was a bit annoying because people liked Renaissance pubs. But the answer is we thought, well, let's do this professionally rather than just sit in the pub and talk it over. You know, what would be useful in terms of, marketing and everything else. And Three Cheers, so we approached various different branding companies, and Good agency won the pitch, and they came up with Three Cheers. Yeah. For lots of reasons. I mean, I like it's obviously very British. It's kind of celebratory. It's fun and positive, and that's what a pub's all about. There's three of us.
And it was done for the King as well. Like, we recorded this 3 days after. Yeah.
No, but exactly that. So whenever you're, 3 cheers for Sunday roast, 3 cheers for summer gardens, 3 cheers, you can use it for anything. And we just like that. That's the bottom line.
And obviously there are 3 of us involved, only 2 of us today, but Tom, Nick and I obviously started the business in 2003, and there was 3 of us, so that was the other sort of string to that reason.
And where did all you guys meet?
We actually I met Tom when I was very young at school, when we were about 8 or 9, and then we met Nick a bit later, and then we were all at Oxford Brookes University at various times, and sort of hooked up after that and set up our first restaurant.
And everyone thinks that they know what goes into making a good pub, right? We've all sort of thought that, everyone in Britain has experienced going into a pub, etc. But I always think it's a bit like when Homer Simpson designs his own car. It's probably not as straightforward as it looks. What do you think goes into making a good pub?
I think that's the obvious, it needs to be appealing and welcoming, and, good beer on tap, good wine list, good food. So there's those that's the kind of science side of it, if you like, just making sure you get all that right. A lot of it is just good fortune. I think one thing for a good pub is a really lovely mix of people. I love that, just everyone, it's a community in that sense, and everyone just mixes, and it gives more energy. When I look at some of our pubs that have a wonderful group of locals, and they're from all different walks of life, and there's something kind of we take for granted a bit about that, but it's a lovely thing.
Yeah, part of the reasons why we sort of left restaurants and went into pubs was that, you know, it just creates a different atmosphere. Restaurants, you very much go there for lunch or go there for dinner, whereas when you go to a pub, you go there for a million different reasons, whether it's, you know, you go there before lunch or after lunch, or for a christening, or for someone's wedding, or for comedy, or for the theatre, or, you know, all these other bits and bobs that go with it. So
because it's also one of the things you talked about on the website that really struck me is you talk about handsome pubs, right? And they are all 9 in the brand are quite striking pubs in their own right. Talk us through sort of how you did the first couple and how you got on the journey.
I mean, one of the lovely things about being small and it's just me, Nick and Mark, and you know, we're able to move with the times, think on our feet. You know, ultimately it's about, you know, rather than having a cookie cutter approach, like this is what our pubs look like, you actually need to look at the building, look at the history, look at the local area, etc., and try and sort of breathe new life into it. I mean, we're just custodians at the end of the day. That's the thing about a pub.
Yeah.
You know, we may own the leases or the freeholds for a while, but they will, you know, they've got history long before we came along, and will do long after us. So it's very much what's appropriate, what feels right, thinking about who's going to be using it, rather than, as I say, throwing our own ideas from somewhere else into the mix. We want it to be new and interesting, but at the same time, it's got to feel right for the place and the people.
And location's also very important. I mean, we're here in the Bedford. I remember when we sort of first met, you actually talked about, if this is literally the other side of the train tracks, like 50 yards, it probably doesn't do half as well.
Yeah, I think we've always said 100 yards is a long way in London. You go under the bridge to the left as you come out the pub, and it's not so good. You know, we location's always been a top priority for us. And all of ours, you know, we obviously feel comfortable in southwest London and southeast London, and that's why, you know, our estate is generally in these parts.
But you are sort of expanding out, sort of, not quite a bit, are you? But it started very much as a southwest London.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a couple in southeast, and we've obviously got the Princess Victoria over in West London. So I think, you know, suburban villages is sort of what we're looking at. You know, keen to, you know, take on more sites if we find them, but we are quite picky. We are quite choosy. We don't necessarily go for the first thing that comes up.
And that suburban villages point is really interesting, because the pandemic obviously has changed the way that we're sort of working, and has kind of led to a real sort of surge in suburban village usage during the week for lunch and so on. Have you guys kind of been aware of that happening over the last few years?
Yeah, I mean, it's happened since COVID. I think it started obviously happening when we reopened up after COVID. There was a lot more lunchtime trade. I mean, I think we are seeing it switching a bit back the other way, and people are starting to go back into town, and you know, a lot of the big employers are pulling their staff back in, certainly on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. So the twats are not in Clapham, particularly on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But yeah, I mean, I think people are working from home a bit more. We are seeing a bit more early drinks, potentially on a Thursday, Friday night, people coming in at, you know, 6 o'clock rather than maybe 7:38 before.
Yeah.
So that's all positive for us. But, you know, I think people, you know, the pandemic's sort of behind us now. So I think that traditional trade of quiet on Monday, Tuesday, building up throughout the week seems to be sort of coming back.
Yeah. What's the best thing about running a pub?
The best thing about running a pub? Free beer.
Yeah.
For me, it was always, I mean, working in this industry was actually, your work is where other people have fun. Other people relax, they have a good time. So it's a lovely environment.
And a bad thing.
Well, it is, but it's a lovely environment in that sense. You know, it's that rather than be somewhere cold and dry, it should be fun.
And
particularly in this world of, all anxiety and concern. It should be a fun, relaxed, happy place. And I think that's pretty cool.
And you're doing some pretty cool things around your 20th anniversary as well, right?
Yeah, it's been great. It's been good. We come up with a sort of few ideas, obviously going very British, obviously it all being around the coronation. And this year we thought, and obviously the British pub, we thought we would go quite British on it. So we've done an English sparkling, which we have had made down in East Sussex, a vineyard called Henna's. We've had a elderflower gin made, and also a pale ale made by Brixton Brewery.
So that's quite, you sort of become, not only are you kind of running a real estate business, etc. as well, but then you're also kind of creating these sort of mini drinks brands off the back of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly a brand. It's something fun for the year, for the summer / autumn, and frankly, they're doing the hard work, obviously.
Yeah.
We're not suddenly taking on a microbrewery and doing it ourselves.
Yeah.
They are doing it. I mean,
and it's
they're
working with
great.
some of
It's
our
lovely
suppliers,
working.
isn't it?
It's working with our suppliers. Brixton Brewery, they're great guys down there. It's very local. So it's all that partnership. It's good fun, and it's easy and a nice thing to do. And it's just, doing something memorable as well. I mean, there's also other things we're doing in-house, like we're doing 20 flash sales with all the drinks will then be on at 2003 prices. We're doing a £20 menu. We're doing various cocktails using our drinks, obviously. So, there's a whole load of things going on through the summer.
So how do your days kind of divide then in terms of, or perhaps it's easier to think about it in weeks, in terms of the hours worked? What actually goes into running a pub?
I mean, we obviously been going for 20 years, Tom, Nick and I, so we end up splitting ourselves quite well. Tom tends to spend more time doing the PR, the marketing, the refurbs of all the pubs, and working with our PR and marketing director, and then working with all the builders behind the scenes and all this side of things. Nick does a lot of the financial stuff, so he does a lot of the paperwork and organises that side of things. And then I seem to spend my time sort of chatting with the general managers, the sort of ops team, basically. There's sort of three guys that are sort of underneath me before the managers, who have been working with us for ages. And so it's a lot of chatting, going backwards and forwards. But I think, a bit like a Venn diagram, I think, Tom, Nick and I sort of cover all the areas. I'll dip into his area, Tom will dip into mine, and vice versa. So, it's pretty constant.
Exactly that. And recruitment is obviously a big thing as well. And it's so often people's first job, particularly my sort of generation, millennials and so on. You're almost at 250 people now. That's pretty extraordinary. What are the types of skills that you're looking for when hiring people?
Well, obviously, we don't need vast amounts of experience to get involved in this industry. A lot of people can, start at the bottom and very quickly work their way up if they have the right attitude. They want to get involved. They're not scared of hard work. They want to, smile and be nice and chat to customers. And really, that's what we're looking for, because, we can train people up and get them to where they need to be. A lot of my managers have been with us for sort of a number of years. We were going down to Henna's to go and sort out our 20th anniversary sparkling wine, and there were 7 managers sitting in the 2 carriages that we were going down to East Sussex, and we were chatting about the 20th anniversary. And it was amazing that we worked out that between those 7 managers, that we'd actually had 70 years of service with those 7 managers. So some of them had done 15 and some of them had done 5. But actually, that's a long time to be working for one company, particularly in this day and age.
Yes, it is a long time. And so how do you look to kind of grow the business? What does the next 20 years look like for Three Cheers?
We'll see. I mean, the lovely thing is, again, we're not pressured into growing at a certain rate. It just it comes down to opportunities.
Because it's all private. It's all just you guys.
Yeah, well, there's no private equity money or anything like that, which is great. I mean, in terms of, it was meant to be a lifestyle business, if you like. It's something we love. We love pubs. We love every aspect of it. And so we can just move at our own pace. Well, obviously, we want to grow, and we're probably looking at the bigger kind of sites rather than the smaller pubs. With the pressures on the individual pubs and the business as a whole. So it's we'll grow when time is right.
And has that love of pubs changed at all? Because that's one of the things, you're obviously very different stages of your life now than when you kind of started out. But that love of pubs, has that changed what you love about them?
I'd say almost it's grown, if anything. It's funny. I think COVID was obviously a big wake up for people, and the love for the pubs that came out of that. When suddenly something's taken away, that's when you realise, crikey, what a wonderful thing that is. And it's and
there are less and less pubs in the UK. Lots of pubs closing. I think I definitely feel more part of the pub than when we started. And I think it's important that we preserve them. As you said, we're custodians, and we'll look after them for as long as we've got them, and then we'll hand on the baton to someone else.
Yeah. And one of the things that you do, particularly in terms of the expansion, growing the pubs and growing the footfall and all this, is the amount of kind of events and experiences, right? That whole idea of the pub as a hub. I mean, here at the Bedford in Balham, there are events going on almost every single day, right? Right from sort of baby groups right through to the sort of comedy evenings. I mean, it's pretty much South London's most preeminent comedy club now on a Friday and Saturday night, right? It's pretty extraordinary how that's kind of developed. Can you talk to us a bit about how that's changed in the 20 years? Because 20 years ago, putting on an event took quite a lot of work and flyering, etc. Now it's much easier to kind of put those things together for people to be able to come here, because that's one of the things I know you stress about some of the comedy and whatever. Like it's not you guys, it's just you guys providing space.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's working with people who come along. I mean, obviously with the Bedford, it had this history. It's the longest running comedy night in the same venue in the country. So, that was already here. The music it's been known for its live music since the 70s. So in a way, with the Bedford, it was quite a lot of culling, actually. I remember coming in after we signed the lease, and there was a huge blackboard. And you look at all the different things that were going on every day, and it was just crazy. I mean, there was sort of practically, model railway building over here, tango, there was a bit of pole dancing, there was obviously the music. It just went on and on and on. I took a photo of it because it was hard to believe. and salsa and everything. So it was just a bit crazy, and it needed to be reduced down to its sort of best parts, really. And then it's working with good people. And obviously we're all for it, because you need to work hard to get noticed. That there's so much going on. There has been so much innovation within our industry, not just pubs, but restaurants and bars as well. So anything that helps you be seen, and anything that adds to your business, and it's generally really good partnerships with these people.
Yeah, and you were talking about the Tommyfield in particular. I think of it fondly because that's where I first sort of lived in London. But that's a pub that has changed dramatically. And back when I lived there, it didn't really have any comedy. But now it's sort of that again has become quite a big comedy night in its own right.
It has. Different team. There's ABC Comedy, James Gill, and in fact they won very high-profile Chortle Award this year.
Yeah,
it's amazing the names that go through the Tommy. I mean, Kevin Bridges was there last week. The name, the really high-profile names, and it's wonderful. It's just a 80-seat little private room on the first floor, and it's built an amazing reputation. So, again, James approached us. Maybe 11, 12 years ago. I'm going to get that wrong, but it's over a decade ago. And we've just supported him. He appreciates us, we appreciate him, and he's now running almost every night at times. And it's amazing how much comedy there is going on there. So it's great. It spreads the word, and it's something different. And we love comedy. So, to be supporting that can only be a good thing.
Yeah, and it's been great for us. I mean, that's been a tricky site, being quite central, given COVID and everything that we've been through, and the comedy's really helped, keep the business going, and so has the accommodation upstairs. So, yeah, it's because it's a tough gig there. So, we're happy with the comedy.
What do you wish you knew now? If you could go back and tell yourself something 20 years ago, what would it be?
I suppose for me, it's I think we were slightly rabbit in headlights when we first opened the Aberville in 2003 on Aberville Road, and we tried to do everything on a shoestring, which is a good thing in some ways, but trying to sort of hold on to secondhand ovens and ice machines, and not doing proper refurbs, and not getting the right team in, trying to run it very tight. I probably just give myself a bit more of a break, and actually once we got the Aberville up and running and we realized it was successful and it was doing well, there was that feeling of relief when you could just sort of relax a little bit, and so I think I'd just probably back myself a bit more, maybe be a bit more positive.
And then when did you open the second and the third pubs?
So the Aberville was 2003, the Tommyfield 05, and then the Ston House behind Inferno's on Clapham High Street in 2006. And then really we ramped up in 08 when we took on the Bolingbroke and the Avalon.
Yeah.
And that was, we turned a restaurant on the Northcote Road into the Bolingbroke and very much made it feel and look like a pub. And then we did a massive refurb on the Avalon, which used to be called the George in Clapham South. And that was really the sort of game changer really for us as a sort of small business, because taking on those two sites, we sort of doubled our turnover and maybe a bit more sort of overnight. And it just gave us the confidence to sort of crack on and take on more sites after that. I mean, we didn't take another one on till 2012, I think, but and then 2013, and now we're up to 9. And
the Bedford you looked at, you were telling me, and sort of passed on it first time, and then sort of
that was when,
10 years earlier, was it? I can't remember.
We were looking at, I think we were looking at the Aberville. So it was 2003 when we were looking at the Bedford. We obviously didn't get the Bedford until 2017. Good 14 years later. I think I remember sitting actually up there with you, and we were sort of chatting about it, and we were like, they want 400 grand or something for the lease, and it was a tied lease with Enterprise. And I just remember thinking, this is too much for us. We're out of our depth. It's just too big a project. And obviously that was in 2003. So, it wasn't until 2016 we thought, well, maybe it's not too big a project. Maybe we can take this one on. So, 13 years later, we just changed our minds.
Because it is a massive footprint, right? Because a lot of these pubs, again, you don't necessarily see it from you don't perhaps realise is that they go up and up, right?
I mean it's over 22,000 square feet, so that may not mean much to a lot of people, but it's big. I mean there's what you see when you come in, the main bar, but then saloon bar, this amazing room, and then there's a ballroom, 170 capacity on the first floor, plus a private dining room and a cocktail bar. And then there's all the, back of house areas. And then the 2 floors above that, another 15 bedrooms. So it's huge. Logistically, in terms of managing, obviously in terms of the refurbishment, it was very significant. It was very run down. We pretty much remodeled the top 2 floors to get those bedrooms in. There's a lot of it.
For those that are just listening, I do encourage you to check out the YouTube channel, because it is extraordinary, the room that we're kind of sitting in. It's like a mini Shakespeare's Globe almost. Like, it is an amazing place to come and watch comedy and anything. So it does feel slightly surreal sitting on stage here doing it. But what's the what other things do you have in the pipeline? You know, how's the pub going to go? Because one of the things that gets talked about quite a bit is that sort of younger generations are drinking less. You know, but actually, presumably, you don't see that as much of a challenge because people come for far more.
I think it's an interesting thing. On the one hand, you're thinking about innovating and the way the trends are going and making sure you're evolving with the times. On the other hand, you can't lose sight of the DNA of a pub.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of people who are drinking less, but there's also a lot of people who still love to go out to the pub and drink, you know, as much as they like.
Yeah.
So it's making sure you're appealing to those people. You know, it may be that it's reducing down a bit, but you've just got to be on your game and be as good as you can be and have, you know, do it, you know, everything that's all the sort of private events and everything else going on.
Yeah, exactly. And the food's obviously become a big thing. So that's, you know, a lot of the food has replaced, replaced some of the drinking. So,
and you change your menu 5 times a year, you were saying beforehand. I mean, that's...
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of basically seasonal and then a Christmas menu. So it's sort of 4 seasons plus the Christmas menu in 9 sites. So it's 45, 9 5's 45. So it's 45 menu tastings a year. So, yeah, I need to keep my weight off. This is not an easy way of doing it. But
you have to change menus for the regulars because you're a pub.
Yeah.
You know, it's that thing of people who want to, you know, and if it's not changing, they just get bored pretty quick. So that's the simple reason why.
I'll put you on the spot now. How many people do you serve a year?
That is putting me on the spot.
Guess.
In terms of food and drink?
Well, yeah, I guess just how many people do you have coming through the doors? I mean, it must be...
I can't even... If you think at the Bedford, we would have at least 1,000 people coming through the door just on a Saturday.
Yeah.
So the numbers are huge, and there'll be 1,000 on Friday as well. So, you know, we're getting up to, 4,000 or 5,000 just a week at the Bedford. So that's 2 million people at the Bedford. Obviously, that's our biggest site, but we must be getting on to 8 or 9 million people a year or something that we're serving.
Pretty extraordinary when you think of it like that, right?
It is crazy. It is, yeah.
Tell us about some of the stories that you've had with people, right? Because you've employed a lot as well, right? If you're serving that many people, you must have employed over several thousand of people during that time as well.
Some of the stories about...
Well, we've been robbed twice by our own staff, managers. Right. When somebody's general manager, and we give them quite a lot of autonomy.
Yeah.
And there's always a way, if somebody's got a criminal mind, there's always a way around any of the safeguards you put in place. One of them, actually, I think he had some substance abuse issues, amongst other issues. He was a sort of events manager at the Avalon. And it was broken into in the wee hours on a Saturday night, and it was only actually 2 of our other senior staff looked at the CCTV footage and recognised the profile of this chap. He had quite an unusual sort of parsnip-shaped body, and sure enough, it was him. But he then fled the country, went off to Tenerife or something. So there are downsides, but we've had couples get married. There's obviously, generally, it's a really positive story, and it's wonderful. Yeah, when I don't know how many babies,
lots of babies
come through. Yeah. Couples have met working in our business, so it's great. I mean, it's meant to be a family, and that's the way we try and look at it.
What are the team sort of offsites like? That must be a bit of pressure. Presumably you do them in January, right? That's the sort of standard.
We used to do staff parties in January because it was the sort of quietest month of the year, and we used to do them on a Monday evening. And they've been entertaining, and when you get sort of 200 people in a venue and it's your staff and you've given them one night off in the whole year, there are some pretty crazy stories that have happened then. We've actually moved it to a summer party now because we think it's slightly easier to find a good venue, to find a good space. So we do it on a Monday night. But yeah, we've done lots of things. I mean, obviously, general managers. We've been on wine trips.
Yeah.
We're off to Rhone in June. Tom's coming to Rhone, so we're going to have I think there's 10 or 12 of us going to Rhone to go and have a couple of nights there.
What are you doing there in Rome?
Just tasting various Côte de Rhones and Crozes Hermitage and various different wines with our wine supplier. I think we're staying actually in the vineyard. There's some accommodation in the vineyard, so that's quite a nice thing for the staff. So hopefully the sun will shine. It should be a nice trip for the staff. And for ourselves, but yeah, we've done lots of other things. We obviously went down to Henna's with our English sparkling. We've been up to Timothy Taylor's, and we've been to Western Cider, and we've been down to Brixton Brewery, and we tend to sort of try and that's one.
It's a pretty great job, right? Like, yeah. I mean, it's sort of like you've
got to enjoy that side of it.
Yeah.
And it's just sounding belabouring the point. It should be fun. You know? I mean, obviously, it's bloody hard work, and it's quite a young mix. I mean, obviously, our managers have been around for 10, 20 years. I mean, obviously, we're sort of growing older together. But it's quite a young crowd. The people who want to work in this industry have a sort of, hopefully, as a really positive attitude. There's a bit of charisma bouncing around. So that's kind of how we've always run it. Whether it's staff parties, we kind of
lead from the front.
Yeah, and if we're positive and enjoying ourselves and trying to engender that within the company, that's can only be a good thing.
What stories have you got from the staff parties? There must have been some fun ones.
Well, it's repeatable stories.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's what can we repeat?
I think you're allowed to repeat that, aren't you?
What?
Me finding you finding me in the Abbeville all those years ago.
Yeah, in a state of undress, shall we say? And I had sort of gone to sleep in the office in the cellar, and he came to found me looking for a phone. It was practically before mobile phones, because he'd woken up with all the lights on at 4 a.m, front door wide open. All the other staff had, dribbled away. And it had been left to us to kind of hold the fort, so to speak, but we'd both slightly worse for wear. So, it's kind of un-PC, but, again, you have to watch the downsides of booze, but we have a lot of fun. It's lovely to have a drink and a laugh, and I'm trying to think. Yeah, stories. The police have been called once or twice. That's been, as we've gotten bigger, it just shenanigans. But yeah, that's good fun.
And what other changes have you seen over the 20 years? I mean, has mobiles changed it in terms of people? Yeah, I know some restaurants find it frustrating about how long people are now, like taking time to order food, and for example. But I don't think it's changed. Sort of it's quite undisruptable, really, a pub, right?
Well, I think that's what's so great about it. You still just hold on to those traditional people that want to come to the pub. And so, I look at the Abbeville, and okay, we were selling Smirnoff Ice and, John Smith's Extra Smooth in 2003. And now we're selling, gin and tonics and Aperol spritz and maybe a craft lager, but actually the fundamentals of in terms of the customer and the barman and the manager and the experience that the customer gets when they come to the pub, it sort of hasn't changed a huge amount, and it's still. And that's what's sort of rather wonderful about it, because everything else has changed so much, and, with the internet and mobile phones and all these things. And I think that's sort of one of the reasons why we still love the pub, really.
There's quite a few people that are in government that listen to this show, etc. I always talked about pubs during my time in government being, sort of one of those things that is universally popular, and announcing policies that benefit the pub will never go down badly at a budget. It has, though, been an extraordinary few years for pubs and hospitality more broadly. If people are listening from the government, what would you like to sort of say to them?
I suppose the whole business rate thing, I think if they want the high street to survive, they need to look at how business rates are charged to the pub businesses. I think there have been some nice amounts that have come off business rates on the back of COVID and things to help us get back on our feet. So that's all welcome. But obviously, if it comes back at the same where we were before, I think people are going to really struggle. And the high street's obviously incredibly important. I mean, the other thing, I suppose, is the VAT on the food. That if you go to a supermarket and buy a sandwich, there's no VAT on it. Whereas if you come to the pub and buy a sandwich, there is VAT on it, which obviously is quite a difficult, that's a competitive advantage for the supermarket. And it's just quite difficult for us to compete with the supermarket on that sort of, quick lunch. Because we always end up being expensive. And I think, Monday to Friday, lunch times, it'd be nice if we could have a bit of help there. Because the supermarkets obviously are fine. I mean, those are the two big things for me.
VAT off during the week or something like that?
Well, I suppose so. I mean, I think that would probably be quite difficult to manage.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, so I don't think, VAT on drink, that's fine, but I think VAT on food would be nice. Having said that, there's a lot of wet-led pubs all over the country that are paying 20% VAT, so I'm not sure that they would be particularly happy me saying that. So whether it needs to be balanced, whether we
but
should.
There can't be that many. There aren't. I mean, wet-led pubs are pretty. I mean, that is just ones that serve alcohol, no food, right? Just for our listeners.
Yeah.
Like you say, a big part of your growth over the last 20 years has come from food, right?
Yeah, I think it's come from food and come from entertainment as well. Whether it's the comedy or the theatre, or whether it's a quiz night, or whether it's a wine tasting evening, or whether it's come from accommodation, because we've looked at areas within the business where we can put hotel rooms. So I think those are the areas that it has come from, really.
Yeah.
I think, the other thing is working visas.
Yeah.
I'm not actually sure quite where we're up to, but I don't know really, if the politicians are so aware of what a massive, massive problem it is right the way across our industry. I mean, people can't get the staff.
Yeah.
You can just see standards falling, and that just impacts the business.
Yeah.
Impacts the industry, and I think we've just got to enable people to come. London still has a huge profile amongst the kind of people we want to come, but it is relatively unskilled, of course it is, but so long as it's controlled, we've just got to get more working visas out there, and just try and alleviate our staffing problems.
And that is something that I heard plenty during my time in government. And so what other predictions do you have kind of for the hospitality and the pub industry? I mean, just thinking, actually, one of the sort of recurring themes that's come up that we had as well in our Scotch whisky episode was that people were saying that whilst people might be drinking less, they're probably going to drink a higher quality. And actually that partly goes to your story about Smirnoff Ice and so on, and Aperol Spritzes now that the area around the Abbeville might have changed a bit as well, to be fair, in that 20 years. But it just is sort of, it is quite an interesting observation that people are becoming more discerning about that. They want the stories and the connections, which is why your 20th anniversary celebrations around elderflower gin and English sparkling wine. I mean, imagine sort of you being told that 20 years ago when you were starting out, that would be something you would do, right? Pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, it has changed a bit, hasn't it? I mean, I think, 20 years on, who would have thought we could be growing such delicious, making such delicious wine? I mean, it's incredible what we're doing in Sussex. It really is. Yeah. That's obviously only going to go in one direction. I think we'll just have more and more local and more English, which is great. Other things that are going to happen in the pub business,
I think a lot of it's survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
And there's serious evolutionary pressure on our industry, and the really fantastic pubs, really well run, will survive.
Well invested,
and there's a lot of people who are doing a decent job, but it's not the right location, or it doesn't have the right offer, or and it's going to be pretty brutal, I think. But change is constant, right? And you've just got to be trying to work on your strengths and mitigating the weaknesses of any particular pub.
I think that's why we're looking for bigger sites. The smaller pubs will struggle, to keep going unless they are unless they're sort of owner managed. And any of the small groups will have to be looking for bigger pubs in order to have that turnover, which allows them to run their businesses.
I appreciate it's a bit like asking what your favourite child is, but what's your dream pub? What's your favourite pub that's not one of your own?
It's funny, we get asked that occasionally. I've often said the St Q Inn in St Q in Cornwall, which is just a very historic pub in a very beautiful location. Well run, good crowd of regulars, and the beer is great, the food is great, but it's people and place. Is the thing that I really get from a pub like that. It's all the people who frequent it and work there, and it's the location, and it just creates a very magical, unique place to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's local pubs, isn't it? And I suppose when I'm not in my own, I want to find somewhere that's very relaxed and very welcoming. And I'd probably go for a pub called the George, which is down in Burnham Dean, down in Wiltshire. Just because it's just a lovely pub. It's owner run, managed. A guy called Reese, who used to be the brewer at Sandbrook's Brewery, which is obviously in Wandsworth. And you just always get a nice smile. There's always a roaring fire on in the winter, so it's a very good pint.
So a few quick fires to finish on. Best new ideas.
Best new ideas right now.
Well, yeah, or what's the best new idea that you've had for one of the pubs?
Well, I think in terms of something we've brought in, I'll always remember pizza at the Rosendale.
Yeah.
Pizza obviously has this vast appeal across such a wide demographic. And the Rosendale, it just came in, and obviously it's a cheaper price point for a main, and it's a very family-orientated place, and pizza great for kids. And it just, 3 months up, within 3 months of doing that, there was a little uptick in food sales, and that was something we learned from. If you can get a pizza oven in, if you can find a pizza chef, afford to pay him, all those things, it's just a great bolt-on. It's not how we define any of our pubs for pizza.
I think it's probably the tent in the Avalon, the front of the Avalon.
Yeah, a huge stretch tent.
Yes.
That transformed the outside space at the Avalon.
And that was a positive consequence of COVID, because obviously suddenly we needed to improve our outside spaces in terms of how they were covered and heated and everything else. And that we've ended up leaving up all year round. It was originally for COVID and then winters. And we thought, we've got such a huge back garden at the Avalon, which is it's open sort of spring till autumn.
Yeah.
That we just could cover the front area permanently at the Avalon.
Probably converting the upstairs at the Tommyfield. I seem to remember a manager decided to leave his rather grubby flat above the pub. And at that moment, I sort of thought, ooh, why don't we put some hotel rooms up there? I know it was incredibly expensive to do, but
it was a good investment.
It was definitely a good investment.
6 rooms, but because it's Kennington, it's quite central.
Yeah.
We have very high occupancy rate, and that's been very good.
What would be let's go through sort of basically what your favourite kind of last meal would almost be. What would be your first pint, your favourite pint?
Well, I'd probably go for Timothy Taylor's, just because I think it's a very good beer. We've been up with the managers up to Yorkshire a couple of times. It's my wife's godfather's brewery. And so we have stocked it since 2003 when we opened the Abbeville. And I remember Madonna was in the Dog and Duck. She had half a pint of Timothy Taylor's in the Dog and Duck up in Soho, and she was recorded on the news saying that her favourite beer was Timothy Taylor's, and literally the sales just went through the roof. I mean, we were just selling out of it for weeks.
The Dog, isn't that where William and Kate went?
That's where William and Kate were on the weekend.
Famous Dog and Duck. And what would be your favourite meal?
I suppose, I'll probably go very sort of traditional pub, and probably go for a classic Scotch egg.
Yeah.
And then follow that with fish and chips.
Yeah, I remember the debate during COVID whether Scotch egg classed as a meal or not. Yeah.
I'd probably go pork belly.
Yeah.
It's one of those things I find irresistible, and it's become a great pub staple.
Yeah,
pork belly with salsa verde or whatever it is. Lots of different ways of doing it. It hits the spot.
Favorite nightcap?
You're more of a tequila man, aren't you? But
I am. So really, really good tequila or rum.
Yeah.
I'm less of a whiskey and sort of cognac man.
Yeah.
I'd probably just go for a large Jameson's on the rocks.
I like the way you emphasise large. And who's been your most famous customer?
We've had a few, but I think certainly the most high-profile, famous was here. Ed Sheeran recorded his first EP before we were involved in this pub. But he, one of our managers, was friends with his manager, and he came in here. He had a private evening here with his friends.
Yeah,
a few years ago. So he would certainly be number one on the fame scale, I'm sure.
Another good redhead. And what kind of gigs have you hosted here then? There must have been some big ones, right?
Music or just across the board?
Well, yeah, music, I guess, but yeah,
music
across
primarily.
The board
Probably our biggest guy that we've had here was Simon Le Bon, who played here back end of last year, I think it was.
Wow, that's pretty sizable. Yeah, Ed Sheeran, Simon Le Bon.
But yeah, no, there's an awful lot of Katie Tunstall. There's a huge roster of kind of emerging British talent who've come through here, that's for sure.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
All right. Excellent. Well, I think that's a terrific way to finish. So thanks so much for coming on and sharing the story of Three Cheers over the last 20 years. It reflects the way that South West London has changed so much, and it's great to see you guys expanding, and we look forward to seeing what the future holds.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jimmy.